If you want to outpace the competition, you have to operate efficiently and stop leaving money on the table. Today, we're diving deep into how to leverage technology to eliminate bottlenecks and scale your operations without just throwing more bodies at the problem. Joining me is Dwuan Hammond, principal owner and CEO of Global Impact Financial Solutions. Dwuan has an incredible track record, helping drive over 200% revenue growth and more than 500% profit growth for high-performing firms. This is Personal Injury Mastermind. I'm Chris Dreyer, founder and CEO of Rankings.io, the elite performance marketing agency for personal injury law firms. In this condensed webinar sponsored by EvenUp, we're going to break down how to optimize your firm's search visibility beyond Google, use AI to capture every single lead without bloating your payroll, and shave hours off your case lifecycle to get better settlements faster. Let's get into it. Everyone knows AI is reshaping how clients find and choose law firms, and many of us used to just default to Google. We would type in a query, we would go look and look at the map pack, look at the reviews, and we wouldn't do a ton of research before making a decision. We might read a few reviews, but now that has changed and people are going to the LLMs, to Gemini, Perplexity, ChatGPT, and they're doing their discovery on other resources, other websites besides Google. So it's important to optimize differently because people are getting their information before they make a decision differently. It's if you look at your Google Analytics, you're going to see this big spike in direct traffic or traffic from AI platforms, whereas before you could directly attribute to Google, to your local maps. And basically, AI has really shortened or closed the gap on context and it pulls and synthesizes information. We know that Google's responsibility was to organize the web, and because of how it's organized, LLMs are using that relevancy to basically shape decisions and to make recommendations. And really, so what's changed is now AI is being trained, Gemini is being trained on YouTube. Meta is being trained. They just updated their policy on Instagram and Facebook. Grok uses X, of course. ChatGPT, which has the investment from Microsoft, uses a lot of LinkedIn. And we know this. They've been really public about it since 2024. Google has used a system called Semantic ID, which tokenizes billions of hours of YouTube video to train their models. And so everything is changing, how you market, where you market. It's more fragmented than ever. And you've got to change. You got to adapt to this landscape. Anything to add there, Dwuan?
Yeah, I would add that, the consistency of who you are is so much more important now across all those streams. And just small changes to your title of your firm could really impact how you show up on a lot of these tools. So yeah, I can agree more that we're becoming much more of I know you guys have heard it all the time. We said all the time we're becoming much more of a global society, but now it's really becoming a lot of really shorter distance between contacts and communication. So, no, Chris, I couldn't agree more.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's go to the next slide. So the first tip is you got to optimize beyond Google. We know that doing things on Google, your title tags, the content, everything that you do on Google is going to be pulled, is going to be discovered on the LLMs, but you got to think about optimizing on other channels as well. So at the top of the list, because of just the distribution of Google and how Gemini is going to play a role in that distribution, you got to think about YouTube and YouTube Shorts specifically. So that is still incorporating those keywords, those topics in the titles, in the descriptions, but that's that's training the discovery of Gemini. And so that's number one is when you're thinking about search everywhere optimization, you got to think about YouTube. The second is Facebook. They just acquired Manus, which is powered. It's a skin by Anthropic. So you got to look at Instagram Reels. You got to look at optimizing your content on Facebook. The reviews that you obtain for the recommendation on Facebook is very important because that information is aggregated out to many sites. And then you have to continue to move on. So now we see a bigger audience, a lot more people that are getting their news from X. So X, of course, powers Grok. So it cannot be ignored any longer. And a lot of these posts are all embedded and indexed on Google. So you'll see them when you do a search. You won't just see the static blue links. You'll see different content formats, video. So it's important to be everywhere. So X, create your threads. And then one thing that I think that many people kind of discount is how important your LinkedIn bio is. Right now, if you're an attorney listening, one of the first things that I would tell you to do is just type in your name, and I can promise you that it's likely that your LinkedIn profile is going to be one of the top ranking results. And now it's powering OpenAI and ChatGPT. So it's absolutely essential to move beyond just focusing on Google and your website, but you got to think about these external locations. And I would give you just one final thought here. Your your bio pages and your about, your team, your firm page are incredibly important. This is not a situation where you go and update them one time and you're done. Like, you need to continually update these because all the LLMs and Google love fresh content. So anytime you have an accolade, an award, an accomplishment, a big case, make sure you go update your bio page as well as your team page. Want anything to add there?
Yeah, I was going to ask Chris. So, what do you think about the core competencies being also always listed on for the law firms because of knowing who they are and how important that is, as well as should you have someone employed in that role to scrub your information as well as the information of your attorneys?
I think it's critical. I think that is absolutely something you could do in-house because you have the most control, you have the most context, and so not only should you be considering updating those bios, those practice pages, and like what your core competencies are, but the other thing too is that information that you're collecting, you should also be updating your LLMs, your LLM projects with those contents, with
Yeah.
that context. Because if you go use them to make any decisions in the future, it needs to have the current context about your firm. So I think that absolutely is a role that should be in-house. Now, it can be complemented by external vendors like myself, like yourself, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. I also think that due to their importance, these are pages that should be prominent. They should be on every single page of the website, in the menu, in the footer, very accessible, in the sidebars, the bylines of all the pages, the content that's written. So that's in a nutshell, just search everywhere optimization. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah, and I would add, like you said, awards matter. People want to know that you win, and want to know the impact. And I always say your outdoor campaign is now being taken by the space of Google and all the other avenues. So extremely important to continue to promote your firm. And I know a lot of firms used to promote themselves, and they look at their information on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis. It is extremely valuable now to have this done daily. And the most timely information is the better fit for who you are as a firm. So I think that's critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next, in a nutshell, is what AI knows about you determines who gets chosen, and that goes back to what we were just speaking on as relevancy. And you need to be known as for your specific expertise. You need to have content externally and on your website that is all about that specialization. So in the past, I would say most websites would have a practice area page, and then they would have a separate case results page. And the case results page would just be the aggregate of every single case result. Now, I think it's more important that each individual page has specific cases related to that practice. You got to imagine that your practice area pages, we don't want to call them a sales page, but that's what they are. You're trying to showcase your expertise, and it's more important than ever to have relevancy when it comes to that. So the relevancy could come from the specific cases that you practice on that specific landing page, but it could also be the testimonials of the individuals that you helped regarding that case. It could be a number of factors, but it comes down to relevancy. And the more relevancy you have and the better it's organized across the web everywhere, the easier it is for the LLMs to pull to understand the context of your firm and your expertise. Anything to add there as well, Dwan?
Yeah. Chris, I would ask another question. What's the impact of negative reviews? How do you feel firms should actually address or get in front of some of the negative reviews? Should that be the only reviews they respond to? How do you direct firms in that nature?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So obviously, yeah, I like to use this example. If you're going to go on vacation and you type in best restaurants near me, you wouldn't expect to see a low rated restaurant. You'd expect to see a high rated. So it's incredibly important to try to maintain as high of a rating as possible. I internally tell our clients that 4.8 out of 5 is table stakes. That because the best cases are the ones where the consumers type in best car accident lawyer, best personal injury lawyer. If you want to rank for superlatives on the LLMs and on Google, you have to have excellent reviews. And also, going back to relevancy, it's the words and phrases in the context that the individual leaves on the review. If they're talking about your car wreck case, you're talking about a slip and fall, that's going to give the LLM more relevancy into the types of cases that you handle. So all that's incredibly important. But back to your question, I think you should respond to every review. And as well as I do, that negative review is not really addressing the individual themselves. It's addressing the future prospective clients.
That's right. That's right. And I think one of the impacts that I've seen over my years, one negative review, to offset that one negative review takes about 125-star reviews. So understand the impact of someone commenting negatively about you, but also for you as an owner not to engage with that individual to clarify or clear it up is so, so important.
Yeah, and I'll just say one final thing
Value of
before.
that case.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll say one final thing on the negative reviews is a lot of times the big advertisers, if you're an attendee that's a big radio advertiser, TV advertiser, a lot of times a consumer won't even do business with your firm. They'll just say, "Hey, I hate your advertising. I hate your radio. It's super annoying, whatever." In those situations, you should absolutely report those because Google will take those down because they didn't have a client experience. So there are some tactics that you can take to get some of those removed, but ultimately use it also as a method, an advanced retrospective, a way of a feedback loop of training, so you can fix those systems that were broken that caused that negative review.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. So tip number two: define your firm's entity to influence AI driven search. So let me expound on this. When we're talking about relevancy, let's first start with a few different manners, different ways that you can segment this. So the first is your geography. If you're trying to be discovered as a St. Louis attorney, you want to rank for or be discovered for personal injury prompts, queries, you need to be associated with anything in St. Louis, the Arch, the neighborhood, Central West End, Soulard, restaurants. You need to have content that talks about the hospitals where someone can get treatment. You need to really personalize it to the geography. You need to be listed in St. Louis Chamber of Commerce, St. Louis associations, goodwill, sponsorships, campaigns, all of this around St. Louis. That builds that relevancy around that category for your geography. Then the next one over is your expertise, your industry, which would be legal. So that's where Super Lawyers comes in, Avo, Justia, Best Lawyers, Law.com, CLEs, where you've been mentioned in the news about a particular case. Maybe you've written a book. All of these factor into the legal profession. And then the third one, which kind of encompasses both, would be your reputation. We talked about the importance of reviews and the words and phrases that are mentioned on reviews, the awards. What's interesting is super lawyers, best lawyers tend to rank better in Google now, and those awards use superlatives in their name, so you can then have that association with the superlative best or super. And then case results are just absolutely huge. And I know outside of California's got their SB 37 restrictions and what you can and can't say, and some other states have restrictions on the case results. But if you can talk about your case results, then I absolutely encourage it. Anything there to add?
It's very important. We said it earlier that defining who you are as a business is extremely important. It's that uniformity across all communications agents. But like you said about winning, winning is important. You may not be able to communicate the actual client that you won on, but you can communicate the dollars collected on um on a case. And that is so vitally important. And I even think about when you associate yourself with cases, meaning it may be something you lend to another partner to try for you. It's still important to connect with those cases when those results come in, because people want to know that you are not only making good decisions for their case, they want to know that you're an expert. So, and that kind of shows that you're not only an expert in your field, but you're willing to give that case to someone else if you're not equipped to handle that case, which is so important for your clients.
Well said. And yeah, we talked a little bit about marketing, how the game has changed. It's more important than ever to be everywhere, right? Marketing is fragmented. We saw broadcast television. Now you got streaming, multiple social media platforms. Now you got multiple large language models, these LLMs, and it's not just Google. So you really need to be everywhere, and they kind of all work together. And so it's I'm not saying that you can't market to one particular channel. If one's working, you should absolutely double down, but they all kind of feed each other. So it takes me to next is, first attracting the case, but now how is AI transforming intake? The number one thing here is AI has bridged the gap of context latency. Let me explain that. It AI can remember previous conversations from a long period of time ago, 1,000 calls ago. If it has any information, it can remember it. It's recorded. That's why you go to chat. That's why everyone loves ChatGPT, because it creates this personalized results for you, right? And so it's bridged that gap. Yeah, you're handling your intake specialists are handling numerous calls per day, and if they're not transcribing that into the CRM, now obviously you want to have transcriptions and all the recordings and things like that, but it makes it very challenging to bridge that gap on context, and that's what AI does. So the other thing that it allows you to do is you can answer in parallel or do parallel dialing. So if you get, let's say you have two intake specialists and you get three calls that come in and you have, two people on the phone. Well, the other, like, what happens to the other, right? Does it go to voicemail? Does it go to a third party? AI can answer hundreds of calls all at the same time. So it's a scenario where you can absolutely capture every single call. And I know some people are concerned about, oh, it's empathy and things like that. That's just around the corner. Like, it can read social cues. It can start to learn and be empathetic. And I think the key thing here is it's gonna turn into the norm. It's right now it's a little odd where we like talking to humans and we like that personal connection, and but I think it's just around the corner where it's gonna feel very personal, and to some degree, it's gonna eliminate a lot of redundancies where you're repeating the same information for them to do their intake over and over. Uh, Anything to add there, Juan?
Yeah, look, I would say there's firms out there that say I always want a live person to answer my calls, but there's still AI support around that to actually transcribe to get the information into your system. So you have that, like you said, those large language models that can actually remember and really, actually summarize your calls to be able to use that information in the right manner you want to use it. I agree with you that there's some tools out there right now that empathy is one of the things they sell of saying, hey, this will kind of read the cues. But I like the personal touch with individuals, but I do believe in the support of the AI tools around it to make that individual that much more impactful and to do the things that they can only do well, which right now is the empathy part and is also the there's something about someone asking you how's your day going and listening to your answer and actually responding appropriately. And I think clients will draw into some of that information. So don't feel like you are um outside of the industry when you still want a live person. just know there's all type of AI tools that support you, whether you go strictly AI answering the phone or you do it as a support model.
Completely agree. That takes us to our next tip. So, one of the main advantages here is you can maintain a lean team. You can use AI to scale intake without adding a ton of bodies. In Naval Ravikant's book, he talks about leverage, and there's code, labor, content, and capital, right? Are the four main types of leverage. And in the past, we always needed more bodies. And I think of it when you think of like farming, you used to row crop and now you've got combines, right? The same now it's happening where if you want more leverage and intake, it doesn't necessarily have to be a human. You can supplement with AI. So there's companies like Capture Now, Neat OCI. And one of the things that I like, and I'll give you an example of this. Okay. I'll give you two really good examples that even if you're a little resistant, where it may come into play. The first is at volume, your quality assurance and listening to every single call. At scale, when you're getting 100 calls, 200 calls, is the quality assurance rep gonna listen to every single call? It's just not possible. So there are tools out there. There's one company called Speed AI that basically has an AI-based quality assurance rep, and it will listen to calls and flag any where you had the opportunity to close a case and something happened, right? So it's a backup and it's just AI-based, and it has certain parameters on saving that call that to prevent that leak. The other thing too is most firms, when they chase a form, let's say you get a form fill and you go to contact a person, you'll have your chase sequence. Most firms will do that for 14 days is very common. With AI, as long as it's in the statute and you have the AI take over after day 14, day 15, or day 30, day plus, you could have them chase for essentially no cost up to the statute. Now I understand, like, there's issues with cases and they get too long, so you can set your own parameters, but that's scaling and recovering cases at a fraction of the cost. You spend so much money advertising. We want our CAC to be, less than $2,000. And hey, if you could just plug AI into your database to go and just recover some of these opportunities that you paid so much to obtain, that's a great use of it. I'm with you, Dwan. I think I love the human first intake element, but I think you could absolutely supplement with maybe a chase agent or an AI based quality assurance rep to really get a lot more impact and give them that tool to power the intake even further.
Yeah, I think you mentioned two things. You mentioned scale, and AI gives you the ability to scale. I think a lot of firms, when they're dealing with intake, you can look. You're always going to have missed calls, no matter how many people you put on the desk. You're going to have missed calls. Also, the talent level of the people taking the calls becomes a problem, and this is where I start talking about single points of failure. So AI removes some of those obstacles. AI removes missed calls. AI removes single points of failure. And it grants two things you talked about: consistency and reduction of labor. So if you're not playing in that game, this is the comments of what if you're trying to grow and scale a business, the things that you're worrying about is look at your best employee and how can you replicate that person across all departments, across the full life cycle of your system. And I think AI gives you that ability. So I think this is exactly why we're here, AI scaling businesses. So this is one avenue that I think people are underinvested in and could invest a little bit more.
Yeah, and I just one final thing before we move on. Really well said, Juan. The other thing is, I think depending upon the size of your firm, it may not be cost efficient to hire an intake rep for after hours or weekends. And that's where AI can fit in. It can be your overflow mechanism. So at least you have 24/7 coverage. And then eventually maybe your in-house team performs better. Maybe you get your lead volume up where you can hire that person to handle those calls at night. But that gives you a very easy, low cost opportunity to handle cases, calls 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'll jump in here, Chris, and kind of talk a little bit more about how AI has changed the operations game. I usually tell every firm that I work with, I work with over a couple dozen firms and helping them scale their practices, as well as to find efficiencies along the way and integrate their systems. So, what I always tell firms to start with is start with their demands, and here's the reason why. Demands is the one area or the easiest area to actually show a financial return, and that actually builds momentum. So when you can actually bring something into your system that is automatically going to generate more momentum, this is where I say the value kind of creates itself, and it allows your firm to become more adaptive. Because when you're bringing AI into a firm, a lot of resistance by your teammates, or your employees, I should say, for that sense. There's a lot of resistance, but when you can bring something in that generates income, and that does for the attorneys, and usually for if you have KPI set up, that usually does for your case managers, paralegals. So I tell everyone to kind of start with the demand level, and what happens is it builds a consistency across how you communicate with the defense counsel or your adjusters. And to me, that's very important because now I don't sound like Dwuan, I don't sound like Chris. I sound like that individual firm and how we communicate consistently across the avenue. It also builds higher demands just because you have better data. So by actually pulling everything and being very consistent, your message is always consistent. And then I would add that when you say strengthen the outcomes for attorney time, and that what that does is that allows an attorney to review a complete file. And this I think is so important that when an attorney, when it gets to the review phase for an attorney to send a demand out, that every case looks the same, has the same information. And I'm not talking about um, where always I'm talking more about the things that are needed in your demand consistently looks the same across borders, and that's so important. And it also is the ease of being able to review rather than prepare. So think about that. And I'll tell you, in one scenario I had 5 case managers, and they were sending out one demand every 3 days, and that was because it was taking them 3 days to fully prepare the demand. So 21 work days in a month, they were getting 7 demands out a piece, which sounds really good, 35 a month. When we implemented EvenUp's demand and the quick demands, it actually went to 3 demands a week in 5. So think about that how fast we actually kinda accelerated ourselves, that we were actually producing 15 demands a week rather than the 6.5, 7 demands. So it allows us to scale extremely quickly. And so when I look across borders, I tell everyone, if you're gonna start at the demand phase. And I used to think the demand phase was the most impactful phase of how you actually use AI to build momentum. And I we can jump to the next slide because I will add to the fact that that now is no longer the case because of the admin functions that have been established. And so let's go to I'll say tip number 4 first: maximize case value for stronger data driven demands. And basically, not only data driven demands, but they're going to move faster, they're going to be more complete, and you're going to see, as long as you actually value it, you're going to see higher values in your cases as you drive them. And as we move on to the next one, and as I was talking about the other things that we can do, and this is about reducing administrative costs and burdens. And this is so important. And Chris, I will ask your input on this, but I think what we've seen and what we talked about on the intake side is just that: reducing time on desk, reducing capacity, reducing administrative costs. And I don't know if you've seen any avenues when you're working with firms where you would see the highest administrative focus.
Oh, I can tell you firsthand, and I have a few clients that come right to man where it's to mind where they have major issues with their cash acceleration formula, right? So the time on desk is too long, and it's impacting their ability to grow, right? Because they're waiting for that check to come in. And I even get the comments like, "Hey, once this case settles, blah blah blah, I'm gonna double down," and or they'll want to reduce their ad spend, and there's ways to solve that through line of credits on the case inventory
Yeah.
or what have you. But absolutely. And one of the other things, and so I'm not an expert. I'm more on the front end, the marketing
Yeah.
and the sales side. But I was going to ask you, and maybe this is a question I'm kind of stealing. What does like have you seen the tenders, the full policy offers? Have you seen with utilizing EvenUp those increase? And I have no idea what percentage of cases get full tendered, and how has that impacted things?
Yeah, I have seen an increase in how many cases actually get tendered full limits through using even up two things. I think the two things that are impactful is the completeness of the demand and the uniform voice of the demand, but also the consistency of the messaging. And what I mean by that is that nothing gets better with time. Outside of there's very few industries where you age your inventory and it gets better. In this situation, nothing is better at time. And if you ever look at the insurance company's defense counsel, that's their strategy. Their strategy is to delay. Their strategy is to let it sit out for a while. So I tell everyone the consistency of movement is so vitally important. It shows confidence. It shows that you are engaged in your case. It shows that your client is engaged. And if you move the same administrative barriers with the AI tools on the front end, it will show consistency on how your clients are treating. So I think those things rolled up in one is the best way to actually get a higher case value and to get more policy limits, because I think that's the thing that actually allows that to take place. And so I'll throw in when we start talking about reduced time on desk. One of the biggest things I've seen is truly around the even up com agents. And you know, I think we did a study not too long ago, and what was told to me, and as we kind of researched the study, that the comms agent actually gives 7 to 9 hours per case back to your case managers. So I would say think of this in this way, that if you have one case manager that handles 100 cases, and if you turn your cases every 6 months, that means you're going to actually generate approximately, if they touch a case every other week, they're going to generate roughly about 17 hours a week. So, what could your administrative team do across that border with 17 extra hours? So, that means every every 2 to 2.5 people, that's a full body. I know we don't talk about we don't look at AI and say this is ability to decrease your staff, but it does two really impactful things for your staff. And then we talked about early, it gives you the ability to scale. And I think that's important, that when you free up 17 extra hours, those 17 extra hours should be focused on what actually generates the highest return, whether it's talking to clients, whether it's talking to adjusters. What is it going to do for your firm to actually focus on and get 17 extra hours a week from one person? I would also say, oh, Chris, please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just want to echo this. So, I was talking about AI eliminating context inefficiencies, right, on the intake, but think about this, guys. The you have less silos when you have less people. So those communication inefficiencies just don't exist because we've all, as we grow, you do your all hands meeting, and now you got to flip 3 times or 4 times on the Zoom before you can see everyone, right? If you have less people that are more empowered, there's less silos that you have to go between. You could actually pay your people more, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to find new people. It's you could pay them more because they're producing more and you're getting more margin. So I think all that's really important to highlight.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. I think it makes a higher quality of life for your employees. I also think it believes that, like you said, scale becomes so extremely important that you have now almost a third of the work week remaining for your employee to handle more cases, not just to give them busy work. And so I think that actually really produces for the firm very well. And that's what we've seen. in the firms that I've worked with is that when we started implementing and integrating the AI technology within certain aspects of the firm of the case lifecycle, what we saw was that there was more capacity. We also saw happier employees because the things that they don't like doing were the things that are consistently that needs to be done on a rhythm that AI was doing for the firm, and it was always delivering. Also, single points of failure, as we talked about earlier, it removes those single points of failure. So you don't carry extra labor because it's okay for your same retention to take place, and everyone's going to have turnover in some sorts. But I saw AI improving our workforce in many different ways. So increasing case capacity is one, and I think there's a pride associated with it also. Case managers, attorneys like to do more. They like to have more ability and the ability to make more money. And a lot of that production for attorneys is a lot of their income is based on production. So I think it works well if you can get them to integrate it. So tip number 5, increase case capacity without increasing workload. And I say that that happens extremely quickly when you integrate the AI system in your overall SOP. So let's move on to the next one. Oh, so I think we're going to talk a little bit about a why, what company I think actually delivers this at the highest level. And for me, it's always been Even Up. Like I said, I've worked with a number of clients across different areas. I work across different industries, but as a CFO, and I always say we uh, we're a business that operates in the law industry. And so I remind attorneys how they're business first and then they operate in this industry. And that's important because at some point there has to be a separation of running a business and running a law firm. There has to be some separation in that to actually keep a consistency and be able to scale your business. But I say that to say I think Even Up partners very well in that approach. That Even Up, I think the relationships that I've had were not only about supplying me the best tools, but also supplying me the best feedback across the industry that allowed my companies to get a lot stronger. And I credit that a lot to the relationships and how Even Up has been at the cutting edge since day one of the industry. So I think that's if anyone has had an opportunity, they should really scan this, take a meeting, and actually ask some questions because I think they can help you a lot in the long run. Chris?
Yeah, so I don't get anything for saying this, but I think one thing that it's not mentioned enough is the data. Because they were first in, they have significantly more data from all the cases that they've worked up, and so they can provide better demands based upon that historical data. So I think that's you got a lot of pioneering new companies entering the AI space, but it's really hard to replicate the amount of data that they have that can help with
Yeah,
these
and I
things.
wanna add one other thing to that. I get asked sometime of why I am so high on Even Up, and I think Even Up started in the industry as demand writers. And then they saw what actually, were the pain points of the industry. And so instead of just coming into the end, they took an opportunity to expand themselves, learn the industry, and then they start tackling the pain points of the industry as they continue to evolve and expand themselves. A lot of companies are coming into the space without understanding the landscape of the industry. So I do believe that it gives Even Up a little bit of an advantage or a lot of an advantage because they understand the pain points of the industry and not at a 50,000 square foot saying, here's the tools you should use because I'm an AI based company. It's a little bit more that I think they are a business in the legal space that understands and knows how to put out AI products. So it's my pitch.
Agreed.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I can't believe that was 45 minutes. It felt like it was 5 minutes. We covered so much ground there, but that was fantastic, and thank you everyone for engaging in the chat here. We're gonna switch gears to the Q&A. Have some great questions rolling in. So let's kick this off. We have a question here from Mary, Georgia, the Peach State. Love Georgia. So, gentlemen, who do you recommend as a good AI phone handling system, and especially with the let's see here, with the intake integration? S-
Yeah, I mean, the 2 that I've worked with and so Capture Now, Michael Mogul's company, it's ran by Chris O'Brien and, Gary Falkowitz. Gary Falkowitz has a very large background in intake, so I think they do great work. So many of our clients use Capture Now, and then the other company that I mentioned that has the Chase agent, Nito, I believe it's Nito CI, I believe that's the domain. So I like the thing that they do different is they can chase lost leads, they can tap into your database, and I think pretty much all of them can integrate into the core CRMs, your Clios, Filevine, LeadDocket, Salesforce. So those are the ones that I'm most familiar with.
Yeah, and I would say Speed AI comes to mind for me. I know, Chris, you mentioned it earlier.
Mhm.
Just the ability to grade your leads and actually have someone to read and dive into it is that gives you a little bit more, again, it gives you a little bit more speed on not letting that big lead pass you by. If you allow individuals to grade your leads, there are going to be mistakes. Speed AI gives you that consistency and gives you the ability to respond quickly.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of speed. I believe they have an integration they just launched for LeadDocket just recently too, so yep.
Wonderful. All right, we have a question here from Laurel. So, how would this work with CRMs like Clio Grow?
Yeah, I think, again, I think most of these that we're talking about will integrate with Clio, with the core CRMs. I don't know how open source Clio is compared to other CRMs. Are you familiar with one?
I'm not. I was going to say I've worked with Clio, but not a significant amount. I would still say that's a great question. I think EvenUp works very well across all those lines. I
Yeah.
think it's a worthwhile conversation to call one of them to as an expert opinion.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. We have Jamil here. This is a HIPAA compliance question. So, what about HIPAA compliance for AI medical review for demand drafting? Jamil says the problem I have is the crazy cost charged by platforms like Claude, Perplexity, etc., for their HIPAA compliant services.
Yeah, look, I so here's what I would say. Two things. One is I think EvenUp. I know EvenUp has a fix for that. They actually get all the HIPAA requirements signed, and they actually have a way to move forward with that. But I would also lead to a discussion of whether you're looking for an expense or an investment. And I think there's two ways money leaves a firm. They leave the firm as an expense or an investment. And when now you're looking at AI tools, it's truly not AI unless it's an investment. It truly is. You have to look for what's going to generate a return for you. And I think having those discussions with an experienced agent or experienced rep can really help you in the long run make the best decision for the firm. And again, like most investments, it's a little bit more of a upfront, but when you look at the return on investment over the life cycle, it should really pay well. So I would recommend that you have a conversation and not to try to do this AI business on your own. None of us are equipped for this. There's a lot coming out very fast, very quickly. Talk to people, talk to the experts, and they can help you.
Yeah, one of the things too I'll say is, I know the question's on HIPAA, but one of the things that I think about is like the human oversight, right? So you want the trained professionals to oversee and make sure there's not hallucinations and anything that's going to cause issues at your firm. So that's where even up is not just pure AI. There's human oversight as well.
Come. We have another question from Mary. Mary, thank you so much for engaging here in the Q&A. So Mary asked, what about agentic features and demand writing processes, flagging inconsistencies and recommended counters?
Yeah.
Pass
So
that to you, Dwan.
yeah, I was gonna say, like Chris just said, there's still human oversight. This is about not demands being written in perfection and being able to send out that demand blindly. This is again what I said about being able to review rather than prepare. There's a significant savings There's a lot of attorneys that prefer to write their own demands. To me, that's a waste of time because that's administrative work and administrative duties that could be passed on to a lesser payroll. So I would really suggest being a little bit more open to the idea of allowing the demand to be prepared in even up, and then having your attorneys review, correct, and get them out to make sure you're not having those issues. But that would be my suggestion.
Okay, Laurel back in the chat. Thank you, Laurel. Would the AI communication be able to create and send retainers for signature?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, both the companies that I mentioned, Capture Now and Nito do, and I think that's one of the biggest benefits for the 24/7, the nights and weekends, right? Instead of,
Right.
"Hey, well, you get the voicemail and we'll return your call on Monday." No, it's like going back to Morgan& Morgan has a saying, "Hook 'em and book 'em." Like, it's gonna
That's right.
automatically sign those. And then you can have it be reviewed, and ultimately, you may have to drop the case, but, at least you can capture at any time.
Yeah.
We have one other question here that rolled in on the side. So, what insights can AI surface that attorneys might miss when valuing a case?
Significant, significant it just has more context. It makes me think of there's this old book, it was called The Checklist Manifesto, right? It was written about this hospital and how these doctors with tons of experience would try to remember processes, and they would hit 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, um, but miss those few others, right? Because of memory of all these other factors. The thing about AI is it's gonna go through those. It's gonna have, mass intelligence to draw from, and, that's where I'm at. I'm kinda rambling at this point, but what do you think, Luan?
Yeah. I would say EvenUp has the AI playbook. EvenUp has the missing documents feature. I think these features are extremely important for the collect making sure all the information is there. And then they have executive analytics that allows you to look at the performance of 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 your employees, allows you to look at the performance of the cases, that allows you to look at so many other things. So I think whatever you need from an executive level is available to you, because I mean AI is a collection of information and it's supplied to you at I guess I like to say time of sale. So it's supplied to you when needed. And I think there's a ton of tools that can help you if you partner with the right company.
Wonderful. All right, well that'll tie a bow on the Q&A. I wanted to thank everybody again for joining, and Chris and Dwuan, this was wonderful. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention PimCon one more time, October 4th through the 6th in Scottsdale, Arizona. I know EvenUp's going to be there. They're going to be all over the place, but it is the premier legal marketing conference, and it's going to be at the Phoenician Resort again, October 4th through the 6th. Grab your tickets now while supplies last. Pimcon.org. Chris, Dwuan, any final thoughts before we exit here?
I just think that, any attorney can look at using AI, creating leverage through, tools like EvenUp, to really expand their capabilities, to create more profitability, and to just ultimately deliver better results for their consumers.
Yeah, and I would leave with saying, purchasing AI tools is not enough. I mean, that's a step in the right direction. The next step is integrating your AI tools within your systems and actually creating new systems so the tools can actually generate the right return. So don't feel that you buy it and plug it in and it just goes forward for you. It has to be an integration, but when it's integrated correctly, it can be a very powerful tool. And I would suggest everyone to take a look at it and try it out.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, again, Chris, Dwuan, thank you so much. Everybody in attendance today, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your great questions. Keep an eye on your inbox. We're going to have a replay recording of this coming soon with poll results, all these resources, all of these great things we covered today. I had a lot of fun. This was wonderful. Thank you again, everybody. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
Huge thanks to Dwuan Hammond for sharing his insights today. AI isn't just something you buy and forget about. You have to actively integrate it into your standard operating procedures. When you build these systems into your firm, you empower your team to focus on the highest return tasks and maximize your overall profitability. If you're ready to stop leaving money on the table and want to see exactly how AI can increase your case values and reduce your time on desk, you need to check out our sponsor, EvenUp. Head on over to evenup.ai to see how their proactive AI can help you turn your claims into stronger, more valuable outcomes. I'm Chris Dreyer, and this has been Personal Injury Mastermind. We'll see you next time.